So before I give you my big list of what I'm expecting to see in the Indian defense and weapons space in 2023, here's a look at what a super booming year 2022 was. Here's the top 5 greatest hits as far as I'm concerned.
It's been one booming year in the world of India's weapons and military equipment. As a brand new year arrives, Battlecry looks into the rearview mirror. Join us as we revisit the top 5 singers this year. These images are still mesmerizing people across the country and the world. The ghostly plume of what's believed to be an Agni 5 ballistic missile launched on December 15th from India's east coast. The Agni 5 has been in service for years, but this test, in darkness, was the first in which India's longest range active nuclear delivery system was tested to its maximum operational range, in excess of 5,500 kilometers. This made it the longest range missile test in the country's prestigious and highly successful integrated guided weapons program. An effort that was accelerated by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. With this test, the Agni 5 has proven its capability. The test took place amid heightened border tensions between India and China, though it was planned many weeks in advance. Possibly as a direct result of the atmosphere, the government did not make a formal statement on the launch as it usually does. Therefore, all that lingers are these haunting images of the missile lifting into the air of India's east coast.
न सिर्फ भारतीय नौसेना बल्कि संपूर्ण भारतवर्ष के लिए विक्रांत.
In September, the Indian Navy finally received and commissioned into service the country's first indigenous aircraft carrier, the magnificent new INS VIKRANT. With design work beginning in 1999 and the ship's keel laid in 2009, it's taken over a decade of shipbuilding for India's most ambitious military vessel to become a reality. INS VIKRANT, the second of her name in Indian naval service, puts India into a small and very exclusive club of nations, with the shipbuilding prowess to even attempt building something as complex as an aircraft carrier. The 45,000-ton floating airfield is designed to operate aircraft from the LCA Navy to the in-service MiG-29K jets. However, aviation trials will only take place in 2023. The Indian Navy is also in the process of identifying new generation deck-based fighters to operate off VIKRANT's deck. Recently, the Indian Navy is reported to have indicated a preference for the French Rafale over the American F-18 Super Hornet, though the contest isn't complete yet. Speaking of Rafales, the last of the Indian Air Force's 36 Rafales on order was delivered in December, completing the 2016 order for 2 squadrons of the jet. The French government has amped up efforts to convince the Indian government to reorder. In October, the Indian government announced that the Tata Airbus joint venture facility to build C-295 transport aircraft for the Indian Air Force would come up in Vadodara in Gujarat. At least 40 C-295 turboprop aircraft will be built at the Indian factory starting 2024-25 and will first augment and then replace the Indian Air Force's AN-32 transport airplanes. 16 of the aircraft will be manufactured and delivered to India from the C-295's home facility in Spain. the Indian facility will become a global hub for the aircraft and is likely to trigger a wave of defence manufacture in Western India. The C-295 will perform a variety of missions, including troop and cargo transport, delivering weapons and systems, functioning as a flying hospital, perform surveillance missions and more. With certain modifications, C-295 airplanes can even perform anti-ship attack roles, though the Indian Air Force is not likely to look in that direction for now. A small but hugely significant development in the defence hardware space this year was HAL's indigenous light combat helicopter, or LCH, finally receiving its first order. The belated but very welcome milestone came after a pair of light combat helicopters spent nearly 2 years on a live operational deployment in Ladakh amid the standoff with China. The helicopters are armed with rockets, a chin-mounted gun and air-to-ground weaponry with anti-tank missiles as the next weapon fit on the horizon. The order for 15 helicopters barely stretches the surface of this helicopter's true worth. But for starters, the Indian Air Force will receive 10, while the Indian Army will receive 5. Hopefully, in the months and years ahead, both services will order and operate upwards of 100 helicopters each, depending on how things pan out. The LCH, a modified and weaponized derivative of the successful in-service Dhruv helicopter, will go a long way in cranking up indigenous content in the armed forces. And so good is the product, there's already been interest from foreign customers. The year is ending, but 2022 pretty much began with a bang, with India scoring the first ever export order of the Indo-Russian BrahMos supersonic cruise missile. The formidable weapon system is in service with all 3 Indian armed services, in land-launched, ship-launched and air-launched versions, but an export has always eluded the missile. Until the Philippines, one of several countries feeling the heat of an increasingly assertive China, turned to India for help with a weapon that has little or no defense against it. The Philippines has chosen the coastal battery version of the BrahMos, a system that detects hostile vessels out at sea and is capable of destroying vessels at ranges of up to 400 kilometers. Other countries interested in the BrahMos include Vietnam, UAE, Indonesia, South Africa, Argentina and Brazil. With such a resounding 2022 behind it, the armed forces will be hoping for an even bigger 2023.
Well, I've shown you the year gone by, and I can tell you that 2023, the year ahead, is looking even bigger in the world of Indian defense and weapons. Here's my top pick of what to expect. There is 090. Operator, die.
2023 is going to have big shoes to fill when it comes to the arena of India's military hardware and equipment. After a busy and bustling year, expectations will be super high for the coming year. While 2023 promises to spring a series of surprises in the field of self-reliance or Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense, they've identified 6 very significant items that will arrive in the coming year. At number 6, 3rd S-400 Missile Squadron. First of the mark in 2023 will be the 3rd Squadron of India's S-400 air defense systems from Russia. Despite its ongoing conflict with Ukraine, the Russian government is working towards supplying the 3rd batch to India between January and February 2023. The Indian inspection teams were in Russia recently, along with the Indian Air Force personnel who visited the production facility there. India's first 2 S-400 squadrons have already been operationalized in the northern and eastern sectors respectively. Now both China and India have their respective S-400 air defense systems deployed along the line of actual control. At number 5, first Indian AK-203 rifle. Another very significant milestone in 2023 will be the production delivery of the very first made in India Kalashnikov AK-203 assault rifles from the new joint venture facility in Amethi, Uttar Pradesh. The weapons are part of a program to produce over 6 lakh rifles for the Indian Army's infantry regiments. Production machinery and kits have arrived at the Indian facility, with top Russian forces telling India today that manufacture will commence very shortly. Battle Cry has been the first TV program to visit Kalashnikov for a first-hand demonstration of the AK-203.
Now, what the Indian Army wants is for this particular weapon, a pretty worthy successor of the old AK-47 to become a standard assault rifle infantry weapon for the infantry units of the Indian Army. One of the special things about this weapon, we're told, is that it has a special capability barrel. It has retrospective compatibility with many of the systems, including the magazines and ammunition of the old AK-47s. Remember, India's Rashtriya Rifles units and infantry regiments are one of the largest users in the world of the Kalashnikov series of rifles.
At number 4, first Zorawar light tank. A small but extremely important entrant into the Indian Army in 2023 will be the first indigenous light tanks under Project Zorawar by the Defence Research and Development Organization in collaboration with private sector giant L&T. The Defence Ministry recently cleared the procurement of 354 of these tanks, being built specifically in response to an Indian Army requirement in Ladakh during the ongoing standoff with China. The PLA's deployment of more agile light tanks like the ZTZ-4A in the Depsang and South Pangong sectors had triggered an urgent push at the Indian Army headquarters to look towards more lighter, more agile tanks than the workhorse T-90 Bhishma tanks that India has deployed at those heights. Unlike heavy main battle tanks, light tanks like Zorawar and Chinese counterparts are nimble, can climb higher, can perform better in rougher terrain, and are far easier to maintain, since they are purpose-built for high altitude and cold temperatures. At number 3, last Scorpene submarines. bearing 066, range 35 km. The year 2023 will also bring to end the enormously important Scorpene submarine building program, with the final 2 submarines to be commissioned into the Indian Navy. The 5th submarine, Vagir, delivered to the Indian Navy in December, will be commissioned in January, while the 6th and final submarine, named Vakshir, will be delivered and commissioned a few months later. While this is good news for the Indian Navy, given its steadily depleting submarine force levels, the enormously complex production line will grind to a halt, since there are not further Scorpene submarines on order yet. The French developer of the Scorpene, a company called Naval Group, had been proposing that at least 2 additional Scorpene submarines be built at Mazgaon facility in Mumbai in the interim. While India takes a call on the larger and more complex project 75I, which is tentatively said to be a face-off between an improved version of the Scorpene and the Russian Amur 1650. But for the Scorpene submarine building program, the year 2023 is finally a milestone end to what has been a difficult and turbulent journey. At number 2, first C-295 for Indian Air Force. The Indian Air Force will finally get a moment to exhale, with the first C-295 transport aircraft to be delivered around September 2023, as part of a deal for 56 of these aircraft signed by the Indian government. The first 16 are to be manufactured and supplied from an Airbus production facility in Spain, while the remaining 40 will be manufactured at a Tata Airbus joint venture facility in Vadodara. The actual delivery of an aircraft is of huge significance, given India's excruciatingly long-winded weapons procurement process. The journey towards the C-295 deal had been stalled for years, but took a major political push to see it through, given the Indian Air Force has been eager to induct new generation transport aircraft to feed its growing logistics requirements. By the time the first foreign-built C-295s arrive for the Indian Air Force, orders on the Indian joint venture facility could swell beyond 40 to accommodate requirements from the Indian Coast Guard and possible other agencies as well. At number 1, second Arihant class submarine. And finally, with understandable stealth, India's second Arihant-class nuclear ballistic missile submarine is expected to enter service with the Strategic Forces Command in 2023. The improved second Arihant-class submarine has remained typically in the dark since its reported launch in 2017. It has been referred to by various names, including Arighat and Aridaman. Like the Arihant, which has been on deterrent nuclear patrol since it entered service in 2016, the new submarine is a ballistic missile submarine, or a boomer, because it carries nuclear-tipped missiles and forms the third leg of a triad of air, land and sea-based nuclear weapon-carrying platforms. Enunciated in India's draft nuclear doctrine after the May 1998 PRACHAND 2 nuclear tests. These submarines are part of the Advanced Technology Vessel Project, India's costliest defense project. The program to build 4 nuclear-powered ballistic missile-carrying submarine is quite simply India's largest defence program, estimated at 90,000 crore rupees. Each of these submarines costs upward of 4,000 crore rupees. By the end of this year, India will have 2 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, with the likely operationalization of longer-range nuclear delivery missile systems as well. And this is just the stuff we know about for sure in 2023. So you can imagine what the year's going to look like in full. Battle Cry is armed and ready to report.